Chapter 9.2, Day 1, Solving by Square Roots. This is a review from the previous lessons. Review simplifying square roots. Step number 1. Complete the factor tree. Each branch ends when the factor is a prime number. Keep in mind that there can be multiple pathways for a factor tree. So the starting one is 15 times 10. And then you can break the 15 as 3 times 5 and 10 as 5 times 2. Now we're going to stop here because these are the numbers that are prime factors. And we cannot break these ones anymore. So rewrite the radical as list of prime factors. So instead of 150, we're going to write 150 as 2 times 3 times 5 times 5. Circle pairs of factors. So this makes a pair. So circle this one and take out one number from each pair outside of the radical symbol. So once you take out one number from each pair, so this makes a pair, take one of the 5 out. From the radical, you're left with inside 2 times 3. So your answer is 5 times square root 6. Practice simplifying radicals. So for number 12, I'm going to make a factor tree. So the factor tree for 12 is, this is 4 times 3. And then 4, you can write it as 2 times 2. And then you have prime factors of 12. And that are 2 times 2 times 3. Now you make a circle. So 2 times 2 make a pair. So you make a circle around it and take one number from each pair. So this 2 and 2 makes pair. So take one number from each pair outside of the radical symbol. And inside you get is square root 3. So your answer is 2 times square root 3. For question number 2, you're going to make this 72 as a factor tree 36 times 2. And 36 you can further break it into 6 times 6. And 6 times 6 is 3 times 2 and 3 times 2. I'm taking all the prime factors and writing them into the radical symbol. So which are going to be 2 times 2 times 2. So there are 3 of 2's and 3 times 3. So we have 2 pairs. One is the pair that is 3 times 3 and other pair is 2 times 2. Take one number out of the radical symbol from each pair. So from this pair, I'm going to take out 2. And from this pair, I'm going to take out 3. And inside, I'm left with 2. So inside, I'm left with 2. So my answer is going to be 6 times square root 2. Question number 3, I'm going to do it in a different way. I'm going to break this down as 9 times 5. And I can break the 9 further down into 3 times 3 times 5. Now what makes a pair is, so 3 times 3 makes a pair. So you take out one number from each pair outside of the radical symbol. And inside you're left with 5. So 3 square root 5 is your answer. So now we are going to review the 9.1. Quadratic equations may have 2 real solutions, 1 real solution, or no real solution. If the parabola cuts at the x-axis at 2 different points, like this one, where it's cutting at -2 and +3, then we call it as 2 real solutions, or we call it 2 x-intercepts. If the parabola is cutting at only one point, so let's say this point is 3, 0, so the only one x-intercept or one real solution. If the parabola is not cutting at x-axis at any point, then we call it as no real solution or no x-intercept. Now we are going to discuss the key idea, solving quadratic equations using square roots. You can solve x squared equals d by taking square root on each side. So if you want to solve for x, it means you need to remove this square, and to remove this square you're going to take square root on each side. So the first thing is when d is greater than 0 and you're going to solve for x where x squared equals d, in this case you're going to have two real solutions, and those solutions are x equals plus or minus square root d. When d is 0, x squared equals d has one real solution, and that solution will be x equals 0. When d is less than 0, then x squared equals d has no real solutions. Now we are going to discuss example number 1, solving quadratic equations using square roots. To solve 3x minus 27 equals 0, you're going to use a square root. First step is to always isolate the square term. So step number 1 is isolate square term. So which means that what you're going to do here is 3x squared minus 27 equals 0. So you're going to add 27 equals 0. On both sides, you're going to add 27. You get 3x squared equals 27. And then you're going to divide with 3 on both sides. You get x squared equals 9. Once you get x squared equals 9, you're going to take a square root on both sides. So take a square root on both sides. You're going to get here plus or minus. So the x is equal plus or minus 3. Because square and square root cancel, so you got x equal plus or minus 3 because square root of 9 is 3. Letter B, you're going to solve for x, and then again you're going to isolate x squared term by adding 10 on both sides. So you add 10 on both sides, you got x squared equals 0. Now you're going to solve for x. It means you need to remove this 2. To remove the square, you're going to first take square root on both sides. So take square root on both sides. You can write plus or minus here, but there is no point of writing plus or minus because when it is 0, then it's just 0. You don't have to write plus or minus. X equals 0 is your answer. Next we are going to solve negative 5x squared plus 11 equals 16. So first thing, always what you do is isolate the square term, which means you subtract negative 11 on both sides. 5x squared equals 16 minus 11, and that's going to be positive 5. Now you're going to isolate this x squared, so you're going to divide with negative 5 on both sides. So when you divide with negative 5 on both sides, you're going to get here is x squared equals negative 1. And it said here if d, that is this one, if the d that is negative 1, if that is less than 0, then we are going to have no real solution, because when you take a square root on both sides, the inside of a radical number become negative, so which means that you're not going to have any real solution. So no real solutions. For question number 3, I'm going to isolate the square term by dividing 3 on both sides. So you get x squared equals 25. To remove the square, you're going to take a square root on both sides. So square root of x squared equals plus or minus square root of 25. So you got square and square root cancel. X equals square root of 25 is 5. So plus or minus 5. And that means is 2 real solutions. Next I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 12 on both sides. X squared is negative 2. And when we take square root on both sides, I get the negative number inside the radical. So this means is no real solution. Next, I'm going to add 15 on both sides. 4x squared equals 0. Divide with 4 on both sides. X squared equals 0. And when you take a square root on both sides, you get x equals 0. And as we learned into our definition, when the d is 0, then we're going to have one real solution, and that solution would be 0. Now we are going to discuss example number 2, solving quadratic equation using square root. So to solve this type of quadratic equation where you have a square on the top, it means we can apply the square root property. First of all, we need to remove the 5. So you're going to divide with 5 on both sides. So you got here is x minus 1 squared equals 18. And now you're going to take a square root on both sides. So take a square root on both sides. You got here is x minus 1 squared equals plus or minus 18. So what you do here is now cancel the square and square root. You got x minus 1 equals plus or minus square root. You're going to make a prime factor for 18, and that's going to be 3 times 3 times 2. So 3 times 3 makes a pair. So 3 times 3 makes a pair. And you're going to take out one number from each pair outside of the radical symbol. So my next step will give me x minus 1 equals plus or minus 3 square root 2. 3 square root 2, because 3 comes out of the radical symbol. Now when we add 1 on both sides, so this is the important step. You're going to add 1 in the front, and this term that is 3 square root 2 remain as it is, because you cannot add this 1 with the 3. They are not like term. This 3 has a square root with it, and this 1 is just a real number. In other words, you can write that these are the two answers. So the two answers are going to be x equals to 1 plus 3 square root 2 and 1 minus 3 square root 2. Or you can write it as 1 plus or minus 3 square root 2. Next, we're going to do number 4. We're going to take square root on both sides. So take a square root on both sides. You're going to get plus or minus 12 here. Square and square root cancel. So you got 2x plus 7 plus or minus 2 times 2 times 3. The prime factors of 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. You make a pair of 2, and outcome is the one number from each pair. So you got here is 2 plus 7 equals plus or minus 2 square root 3. Now you're going to solve for x. So it means that you're going to subtract 7 on both sides. 7 and 7 cancel. So you got here is 2x equals negative 7 plus or minus 2 square root 3. And now you're going to remove 2. So it means that you're going to divide with 2 on both sides. 2 and 2 cancel. X equals negative 7 plus or minus 2 square root 3 divided by 2. So just make sure when you do solving the square root terms, when you subtract or add the term, you do not add the square root term with not square root term, because they are considered as unlike terms. If you consider this square root as x, this means that it's 2x that cannot be added with 7. You can write them separately, like negative 7 plus or minus 2x or 2 square root 3, like what I did here. But you cannot add or subtract negative 7 plus 2 and write negative 5. Next we're going to do is number 5. You're going to divide with 4. And what you got here is 4 and 4 cancel. X minus 3 square equals 20. You're going to take square root on both sides. So x minus 3 square root equals plus or minus square root 20. You cancel the square and square root. X minus 3 equals plus or minus, and you can break this 20 down as 2 times 2 times 5, which are the prime factors of 20. Make a pair because 2 and 2 makes a pair. And now take out one number from each pair. And in this case, you're going to take out 2, and inside left is 5. Solving for x, plus 3 on both sides. X equals 3 plus or minus 2 square root 5 is your final answer. For number 6, you're going to take square root on both sides. And you got here is plus or minus 8. Square and square root cancel. 2x plus 1 equals plus or minus 2 times 2 times 2. Make a pair. And you're going to take out one number from each pair. And that's going to be plus or minus 2 square root 2. You're going to solve for x. It means that you're going to subtract 1 on both sides. So 2x equals negative 1 plus or minus 2 square root 2. And then you're going to divide with 2. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus 2 square root 2 divided by 2. So the two answers are right there. 3 times 3